All right, guys. So today I have a returning guest, Liz Lambert, back on the podcast. And today we're going to be talking not about her story, but a little bit because, it all kind of intertwines. But we're going to be talking about the evolution of the fitness industry on a female perspective that we've both seen and experienced ourselves over the last decade. Because I don't know about you, Liz, but I never heard the term like muscle mommy or anything like that until like the last 6 months, where it's just like everywhere now. And I
Mhm.
feel like so many women are starting to step into that like empowerment to be like, you know what? Forget the scale. I want to become stronger and more capable. And I mean, I don't know about you, but is this something that you've also noticed as well?
Absolutely. Like I definitely think within the last year or two that hashtag muscle mommy, hashtag fit mom like has
Hmm.
definitely come up because it is like I think especially with just empowering women overall, not just in the fitness industry, but just in professionalism and career building.
Hmm.
Women are really starting to step into their true potential and hey, I am capable of doing this. Just because I have a guy or a gentleman doing the same job as me, like I can do much more. I can do the exact same thing as them, or even same thing in the gym world, right? Oh, they're squatting this. Oh, I can try that too. It might not be as heavy, but I can still exert the same amount of energy. I can still lift really heavy. And I am proving to myself that I am so much stronger than I used to give myself credit for. And then even for
Hmm.
the moms, you're leading by example for your kids and really setting the tone for hey, if there's something that you want to do, you're going to go after it. But
Hmm.
this is what you have to do in order to get those results too, right? So
100%.
I definitely think that it's taken off within the last more so the last 6 months, but I've seen it for the last year or so.
Yeah.
It's
I
just really cool
mean,
to see.
I know I've been in the fitness industry for over a decade and as well as yourself, and we've both like coached and trained and done our own journey where we've seen like the differences. And I remember when I first started managing gyms and I was personal training back when I was like 18, 20, I would see like all of the females were usually just like on the cardio machines. When I got a female client, they'd be like, "Oh, I don't want to get bulky," or I don't want to lift too heavy because I don't want to, look like a bodybuilder." And they were always obsessed with like circuit training and doing like group classes and all these things. And then I remember when I was leaving the gym in like 2020, I was like, wow, it's very different. Like women are in the weight room and they're squatting, they're deadlifting, they're bench pressing. And when I have clients, they're asking me like, "Hey, how do I gain muscle?" Instead of like, "Hey, how much cardio am I supposed to do?" Is that something like explain your experience to that because I know you've been coaching and training for quite some time too.
Yeah, so I started training and jumped in the gym about 10 years ago, so about the
Hmm.
same time decade. And my first trainer was very much like high intensity interval training,
Yeah.
so it was very low weight, high reps, which was great, especially for a beginner to kind of get introduced into
Hmm.
what weightlifting was, form, really like how do you push yourself past discomfort to kind of again challenge yourself. And then when I finally stepped foot in the true weight room at my college, I was like, oh wow, like this is really this is a lot to take to take in.
Yeah.
And it was guys, but then also girls. And what I also noticed too, especially with when I started, was there was a lot of girls doing powerlifting
Yeah.
over CrossFit. CrossFit was, I guess, just like really starting to kind of get a bigger name.
Hmm.
And the games were just kind of starting at that point too. And I didn't really know what CrossFit was until about 2018, 2019.
Yeah.
But what I saw was powerlifting. And so I saw girls focusing specifically on the bench press, the squats, and the deadlifts. And I was like, oh, damn, like they're moving some weight, but really what they're focusing on again is their form, the exertion of the movement, but then also, too, what accessory work movements are they doing alongside
Hmm.
that to really build the strength. And then I saw them drinking protein shakes. I saw them, carrying around their Tupperware containers. And I'm like, they're eating like 5 or 6 meals a day. Like that's a lot because we're also in the age range where it was like you had to eat 1,200 calories. It had to
Yeah.
be low carb. It had to be like the Atkins, or we saw our parents doing curves, or
Weight
Weight
Watchers.
Watchers, or things
Yep.
like that too. Because it was all about being skinny and the smallest version of yourself and eating
Hmm.
less to be less. But then it was like, but also, hey, athletes eat a lot. They
Yeah.
train hard because of what they need to do when it comes game time. But game time is only a small percentage of what actually goes on behind the scenes too, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think that there's a lot that was never talked about. And if
Yeah.
you did talk about it, it's because you were in the same room as those other individuals. But if you were just walking in, you wouldn't know that, hey, this girl, she's competing for a powerlifting meet. Like she is in prep, she is in training. This girl over here is literally just watching YouTube on her phone
Yep.
on an elliptical for 40 minutes or on a treadmill on an incline of 12, for an hour because that's what they think that they need to do. But long term and longevity wise, we need to preserve that lean muscle mass, right?
Hmm.
But again, it's with the bulkiness. I don't want to get bulky. I don't want to look like a bodybuilder, but guess what? Those bodybuilders don't look like that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like the only way for you to get lean is to put on muscle, right? If you don't
Mm-hmm.
have any muscle on your frame, then you're not going to be able to burn body fat and you're going to have to eat like 1,000 calories in order to actually get smaller. But that's not
Yeah.
any way to actually build muscle. And I think that that was one thing that a lot of people like they hyper focused on like, okay, I have to eat like as little as possible in order to lose as much weight as possible instead of thinking like, okay, how can I eat as much as possible to fuel my performance so I can build as much muscle as I can so I
Yeah.
can lose body fat in a sustainable manner. And I think that it started to shift
Mm-hmm.
in that direction over the last couple of years, like we talked about, where women specifically are starting to be like, okay, like I'm not going to get big and bulky. I need to fuel my body with enough protein, but also with enough carbs. I think that like the low carb era is like starting to like come to a close, I really hope. And people are really starting to like push carbohydrates a lot more as that fuel for training, and people are starting to fear it less. But like I'll coach people, and I'm sure you understand this, where people grew up in like the 80s and the 90s when, diet foods were starting to be promoted and like the tabloids were pushing like the heroin chic, where it was like super skinny, emaciated people were like what you want it to look like.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of still in that mindset. I know my mom is whenever I try to like coach her, it's always like, are you sure I should be eating this much? I don't work out like you, so I shouldn't be eating 120 grams of protein when
Right.
no, that's like the minimum you should be eating.
Right. Well, and it is a stigma of, well, I also was looking, doing some research too, because like some of the women from back in the day, like we look at, let's just say Marilyn Monroe, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody loved
Hmm.
her body, wanted to be like her. She, from what I remember, she weighed like 140 pounds and she had
Hmm.
curves. Like she had the
Hmm.
hourglass figure that girls want. But like then when it got to like the 80s and 90s, it became the Victoria's Secret models, like being skinny, having the hot dog legs. Do you remember that
Oh
at all?
God, I
Um,
remember that too. Like you
but
had to
like
have the thigh gap
the
and
thigh
stuff.
gap, and I
Oh.
remember as a kid, because I was very body conscious
Hmm.
personally, like growing up I didn't have the best relationship with my body, because also like the women in my family, we were kind of short and stubby, to like nicely put it. Like we didn't have, our waist is very small,
Hmm.
and we would gain like a lot of weight when we were pregnant, and so like postpartum women were, they had a hard time losing weight. So I was like, oh, like am I going to look like that down the road?
Yeah.
I didn't really know how much muscle I actually had in my body, because I didn't grow up doing athletics at all. I did ballet for 10 years, and even then I was not even close to what the ballerinas were, because they were all really skinny. And then as I grew up, I was like, oh, I rarely saw them eat. I saw them drink a
Yep.
lot, but I rarely saw them see
Hmm.
them eat.
And that's a huge problem in that I knew a lot of girls who were in that space who like as they grew up, they started to get really bad fractures in their legs and ankles
Mhm.
because they were so malnourished.
Yeah, it's like ballerinas, gymnasts, rowers, like you had to be a certain weight or
Hmm.
had a certain physique in order to get the main role or to be able to be lifted or to have the seat. And so when you have those types of sports, like even wrestling, like
Yeah.
wrestlers, like you had to make a weight class. So cool, I'm going to do fast, I'm going to do a water fast, I'm going to lose 10 pounds in 24 to 48 hours. That is so unhealthy, right? But
Hmm.
now, okay, how can we do this sustainably and healthfully, to achieve the results that we want? So a lot of people now are, I want to be healthy. So, okay, what does healthy look like for you? And everybody has a different description, of that. But again, it's okay, you want to lift weights. What does this look like? I
Hmm.
know that you can lift more than 5 or 10 pounds because you're lifting your 20-pound baby all
Yep.
the time. So
Yep.
why can't we lift more than that? Right. Or why are we continuously staying there? Right.
Hmm.
How are we going to push yourself a little bit more and not feel so, like, not be embarrassed by it? Because guess what? If it's too heavy, okay, that's fine. Drop the weight. There's
Yep.
nothing wrong with that. But again, it's a stigma of, well, am I doing this for social media? Am I doing this for myself? or am I doing this because I want approval from somebody else, right? There's so
Yeah.
many different pieces that go into all of this. But because as a woman, and you think I might be speaking for both of us, or maybe just me, but like we are so hard on ourselves
Oh God.
because we
Yeah.
always want to be the best, or we're comparing
Mhm.
ourselves to the girl right next to us, or to our parents, or to our cousins, or friends, or people we see. And we always start to pick ourselves apart rather than looking at what are we actually capable of? Like, what is our body able to do on a day to day basis
Mhm.
versus like, what do our ancestors, where were their limitations at?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, like that internal dialogue had to change. And I think, again, now more women are speaking up about like their eating disorders, their history, why they started working out, body positivity, and like what their regimens are. And so now it's becoming a norm of like, oh, I'm eating, anywhere from 15 to 2,700 calories because this is specific for my goals, my performance, and what I need to do in
Mhm.
order to get to the next level. Right. So
Yeah.
just the progression of all of this has just been absolutely amazing to kind of see over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think nutritionally, like I remember when I first got on Instagram, like back when I was a senior in high school and I started like really getting into like the fitness and the nutrition stuff. And I would see like a lot of posts that be like, here's a 1,200 calorie day. And it was like different meals that you can have to make it a 1,200 calorie day.
Yeah.
And so many people would like, oh, that'll work for me because it worked for this person. When in all
Mhm.
reality, like you said, like people now are eating like 1,500 to 2,700 and it depends on the person. And I
Yeah.
know for myself, as I've gone through my fitness journey, like right now I'm eating like 3,100 calories and we're trying to continue pushing more. And it's like,
Mhm.
yes, I train a lot, but just because I can eat that much doesn't mean even the same person who's doing the same volume can eat that much versus somebody might need more. I mean, everybody's different. So I think it's so important to recognize, especially females with our hormone profile and how we don't recover from stress as efficiently as our male counterparts. That's actually been shown because of our hormones. So it's like
Absolutely.
with the amount of stress that we have just in our everyday life and then putting more stress on our body through training, then
Mhm.
it's important to make sure we're fueling our body to actually recover because without recovery, we're not going to put on that muscle. And without that muscle, I mean, we're not going to look the way that, most people want to look or be able to perform the way that we want to perform.
Right. Well, and I think another thing too, especially for women who are moms,
Yeah, yeah.
there
Huge.
there is a sense of self-doubt, self-sabotage, and also like they just feel so bad if they have to take an hour away from being a mom. And it's like,
Hmm.
but hold on, you're a person outside of that name. Like
Hmm.
you have to take care of yourself. Just like if your kid had soccer practice, you'd make sure that they get to that practice, right? 4 or 5 days a week. Why can't we do the same for ourselves, right? So that guilt, that mom guilt really comes into play too for women. And I think that now is starting to change because like, hey, you don't have to go to a gym. You can do a 20-minute at-home workout with just dumbbells or kettlebells or even just your body weight. And guess what? You can still get results. But here's what you're going to have to do afterwards. You got to make sure that you're eating your food. You got to make sure that you're trying to get some adequate amount of sleep, depending on like how the day goes or what your
Yeah.
kids do, right? But then also, like, yeah, what are your fuel sources? Are you
Hmm.
eating enough protein? Are you having enough fruits and vegetables? What are your carb sources like? What's your stress level? How's your relationship at home? Right? Like, what's your support system like too? Because a lot of women feel like they have to do this on their own, and that's not necessarily the case. And I think that for me personally, that's where I really started to see more of a change because when I first started, like, it was kind of getting into it, and then I got into a relationship with my son's dad, and that was like, okay, cool, we're gym buddies, and it was like, oh well, then you're doing this for attention, and it was
Correct.
it
Yeah.
just created a really negative dialogue. And then with my husband now, it's like, well, hey, this is what I'm doing. He's like, okay, cool, go for it, right? But it's always that this is what I want to do and here's why.
Hmm.
Here's my nutrition plan. This is how the meals are going to kind of look like, right? So again, it's still inclusive to everybody else, but it takes confidence to say this is what I'm doing for this purpose because also I'm prone to a lot of genetic issues to come
Hmm.
when I'm older. So how can I prolong it as long as possible? And I think also too, not a lot of females look at that as well. Like, oh,
Yeah.
there's breast cancer down the road, or there's cancer, there's high blood pressure, high cholesterol, early menopause. Like, okay, cool. What are we going to do now to take care of ourselves when that time does come? Right? It
Yeah.
all starts the sooner you start, the more that is prolonged down the road,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that yes, muscle is important if you want to get leaner, lose body fat, sustain that, but it's also the organ of longevity. So
Mm-hmm.
like the problem isn't obesity. Obesity is the smoke, while being under muscled, not having enough muscle is going to be the flame, and that's going to cause most of the problems. And people don't realize that like there's a correlation between chronic illness and early mortality versus how much muscle mass the person has. Because, for example, if you're old and you fall and you don't have adequate muscle mass, it's going to take you much longer to recover if you even recover from that situation versus somebody who's, okay, not training like super intensely, but at least like doing the bare minimum of just like moving their body, lifting weights and building muscle and eating enough protein and eating enough fuel in with high quality nutrients to actually be strong and capable.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also too is based on how the person's body breaks down
Hmm.
the food sources too, right? So like
Hmm.
I'll take my mom for example, right? I've been trying to get her to eat higher protein and I'm like, can you give me 100 grams? Like,
Yep.
and sometimes because she's like in that early perimenopausal state, she's like, I can sometimes hit 100 grams of protein, but sometimes I can only hit 70 because that's what my body can like how it feels. Like it feels good, but when I post past that, I don't feel like myself. I feel more bloated. I've had more water retention. But
Hmm.
that also is with our cultural background, like that's not uncommon. So for me right now to say, well, I eat 150 grams of protein at age of 30, but she's, in her late 50s, she started later, even though she was the one that started her weight loss journey first. Her body at this point needs less protein,
Hmm.
but needs a little bit different fat sources and needs different carb sources for her endurance performance when she's doing long bike rides
Yeah.
or in even too just with the high blood pressure and high cholesterol that she's experiencing now. Again, different fuel sources for her versus for me down the road. If I ever get that, like I'd probably be able to still intake more. But just our bodies are built totally different and just break down all of the nutrients from the food that we're getting in. So that's
Hmm.
also something that we have to consider again when we're comparing ourselves to somebody else or seeing another diet plan out there. And it's like, but how is that actually going to work for me? Right. And that's when working with the coach helps because, like, okay, well, this didn't work this time. So let's make a tweak here and see if this makes a difference, right? Maybe lowering
Hmm.
the dairy or gluten. But even then, hey, you're weight training a lot more. It might be time to bring creatine in. Or,
Yep.
hey, it might be time to make sure your pre workout nutrition is important versus your post workout or even just what you're eating throughout the day, right? Every woman, and I think this is really important, every woman is so different that you have to remember this in your journey. Your
Hmm.
body, the way your body is built, your muscles, your skeletal muscle mass, everything is unique for you. And so when we're comparing, we're looking ahead, we're looking back in history. Okay, what are we going to do right now for ourselves?
Yeah.
Right?
I love that you brought that up because I think that not enough people are aware of how what they're eating is impacting their body. And they think like, oh, because I see them on social media promoting this, I have to do that because that's what works. When in all
Mm-hmm.
reality, no, it's like that, though all the things that you see on social media, that can be a guide, but you have to be able to have your own awareness of like how certain things impact you. Like I know for myself, I perform better with high carbohydrates versus like high fats. Like I've tried the high fat approach and it just makes me feel like garbage. So I need to make sure I'm getting like moderate fats so that, for hormone production, because that makes me feel my best. But
Yeah.
I feel like so many females either think, oh, well, I have to have a ton of carbs or I have to have a ton of fat, but they don't understand that, like, hey, if you don't feel good doing this one thing, you can try a different approach and see if you feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same thing for me. Like when I perform or when I'm getting ready for my workouts, I have a little bit more fat and carbs. I don't really have protein beforehand. I have my protein afterwards because I learned, hey, you don't feel great if you have too much protein beforehand. So carbs and fats are our friend pre and then are also our friend afterwards. But
Hmm.
again, it's all trial and error at that point too. But like even too when it's building the muscle, it's like, hey, progressive overload is going to be huge. So again, like going
Yes.
back into the training, let's just say you're going into a CrossFit gym, or you're going into a traditional bodybuilding gym, and you're going to follow an 8-week cycle. Every day, every week, you need to be increasing the weight by a small percentage, right? If you're consistently doing the same weight over time, for that 8-week cycle, yes, you are going to get strong, but long term, you're actually doing yourself a disservice, because you're not pushing yourself to the level of failure down the road to see, like, oh yeah, instead of doing like 25-pound dumbbell bench presses, now I can do 45s or 55s, right? But you would never know that if you stayed at that same weight every single time. And that's something that I see as a personal trainer
Yep.
is, hey, I see you using the same machines every single day. Can you tell me why? And like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's what I'm comfortable with. I'm like, okay, cool. Has anyone ever walked you through any other sort of machine? Have you ever used free weights before? Have you ever used the cables? Have you ever, all I start asking all these questions. They're like, oh no, I haven't. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me walk you through this real quick, because I know that you're capable of doing so much more, but you're selling yourself short because you're just comfortable in this tiny little bubble here. There's
Yeah.
nothing to be afraid of when you walk into this room. And that's one thing I'm working with a client right now is like, we have to own your confidence. If you are not confident walking into a gym, start on the treadmill. Just get
Mm-hmm.
yourself in the room first, kind of scope out what it looks like, what machines are open. But then also, if you work with a trainer who's like, let me show you, who has the confidence because they've worked on that over time, we're going to take you through these machines. We're going to take you through the rigs. We're going to take you through everything. So then, one, how to do a pull day, how to do a leg day, how to do a full body day, a push day, all of these movements, right? You're then training your body to literally work every single muscle
Mm-hmm.
possible to build that lean muscle mass that you want and that tone look that you want. You're going to do the same movements every single day. You're not going to get very far. And
Correct.
that's when that weight resistance kicks in as well, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I think that
so
progressive overload is such a great point to bring up too, because I know that we both talk about this a lot on our social medias, is that like one of the biggest things that we see hold people back or clients back is like you're not pushing yourself as hard as you could during your training session. And
mhm,
I get clients who are like, "Oh, well, can I do like more cardio or can I do more this?" And I'm like, "Well, why don't we do better with what you have?" Right? So like there's a reason why you have the amount of volume that you have. It's
yeah,
purpose. And why don't we try to like, hey, if you finish a set and you think that like, oh, like that wasn't that hard, then let's up the weight. Like you can't
absolutely.
be afraid to fail. And I think so many women and so many people in general, but so many women when they get into the gym, they have that fear of like, I'm going to hurt myself, or what if I can't complete the reps with this amount of weight, so I just won't try it. Where it's like, hey, if you fail, that's okay. Like we learn and we grow from our failures and then we can adjust and move forward. But
Yeah.
I think so many people stay stuck because they're afraid of failure. So they don't push the barriers. And then they are always like, I feel like I'm seeing results, but I don't know, and they kind of remain stuck as opposed to
Mhm.
like actually moving forward and building muscle.
Yeah. Well, and I think again with women too, we are so hard on ourselves because we want
Hmm.
to be perfect.
Right.
And striving for perfection is going to drive you fucking insane.
Oh my gosh, yes. I think we've
Like,
both been there to the point where like you're sitting there like, why can I not get this? And it's like, oh, right, because I'm human and I have imperfections and weaknesses, and that's okay because
yeah.
we all do.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because like the CrossFit gym that I go to, I'm coaching a couple of girls there nutritionally, but they've been girls that I've been in classes with, and they've seen me before I had my daughter, then come back in postpartum and do the slow progressions to now being able to like do the RX workouts again
Yeah.
confidently and lifting a lot heavier. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm focusing on my sleep. I'm focusing on my protein intake. I'm focusing on my post workout nutrition and recovery. I'm also focusing on myself.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah.
stopped I stopped looking at everybody else around me to see what are they pushing in the class. I'm like, I know my numbers because I record my weights. That's why I always tell clients, record what you've lifted, because then if you look back to be like, oh, well, my back squat was like 205 for a PR last time. Okay, cool. I'm already at 195 for like 4 sets of 5. I can do more, right?
Yep.
So if you look at your numbers and it's literally you versus you're going to be able to push yourself further along. I look at everybody else in the gym and I'm going to sit there and cheer you on and say, I know you can do more. That looked way too easy,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they're like, oh, okay, that makes a difference. I was like, so find the people and the support system that is literally going to push you and cheer you on, but not pass judgment on you, regardless if you're doing a level 1 workout, a level 2, or an RX prescribed workout.
Mhm.
Regardless, we're all in there choosing discomfort and literally pushing ourselves past our limit. But it's the level of intensity that you bring into the workout that's going to make a difference down the road.
Correct. Yeah, and
Right.
that's how you move forward. You have to get outside of your comfort zone in order to grow. If you're always comfortable, then you're not growing. And I think that
Absolutely.
everybody knows that like we're in like an era where everybody's like obsessed with personal development. We all understand that like yes, we have to get out of our comfort zone in order to get better, but
Yeah.
you have to carry that into every area of your life.
Yeah, it is. And then, and then something too, because like, again, another conversation that I had was the number on that scale.
Yeah, let's talk about that because the scale,
The,
people are obsessed with the scale and there's so many misconceptions on the scale. I've
I
done some
do not like
podcast
it.
episodes on the scale. I have, let me tell you, Liz, I haven't stepped on that scale in like 2 months. I actually forget that it's there because I don't care.
It's a dust collector at this point,
It
right?
literally is so dusty.
But it is. But like, I was having a conversation with someone. They're like, well, I want to get down to 120. I'm like, can you tell me the significance of that number?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's what I used to be. And I'm
And
like,
that's the
okay.
answer every time
And I'm
too.
like, okay, but what's the significance of it?
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of stop. And then like, I had a client once that was like, well, that's what it says on my driver's license. I'm like, but how old is that driver's license? They're like 10 years old. I'm like, okay, cool. So what's happened in the last 10 years? I'm like, I'll tell you what it said on my driver's license 10 years ago. Ain't no way I'm ever like my right leg weighs that much. Like, like, but again, what's the significance of the number on the scale? And what makes you feel like a failure if you don't get close to it? What
Yeah.
if we took the scale away and said, hey, let's just focus on progress pictures. Let's focus on how your clothes are fitting, how your sleep is, how your hunger, where your hunger cues are. Some women like, what's your sex drive like? Like, what
Yeah.
all of these things mean so much more than the number dictating how much muscle, bone, water weight you have. Like,
Right. And it can fluctuate for so many different reasons that are completely unrelated to fat gain or fat loss. Like,
yeah.
I mean, like if it's your time of the month for the females out there, like you're gonna be like I had a client once who would gain 10 pounds every single time that she went through her menstrual cycle. And it was like, that's just how it is. And then we're gonna go right back to normal. But that's just who you are. Some people gain less, some people gain more. But even if
Yeah.
you have like a crappy night of sleep, you might be up on the scale. If you had a really intense workout the day before and you're super sore, your body's inflamed, the scale's probably going to be up. Or even
Yeah.
something as simple as like, I know for me, my body's super sensitive to things. So like if I take Tylenol, or even if I take like, if I have like a diet Pepsi, the scale's going to be up. And I
Yeah.
just know that like, hey, it's not related to fat gain. It's
Mm-hmm.
all related to how my body's holding on to water and inflammation. And so that number is so skewed, but people rely so heavily on it that it literally dictates how they approach their day because like the scale doesn't look the way that they wanted it to look one day, they're having a bad day now and then they're questioning their entire process. And
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have a coach, it's really easy for them to maybe they were doing everything right and they were actually moving in the right direction, but one day the scale went up 2 pounds and they freaked out and they said, you know what, I'm just going to eat way less and I'm going to do way more cardio, and they ruined everything.
Yeah. It it just blows my mind, and it makes me so sad that women feel this way. Like,
Yeah.
I remember feeling that way in college
Hmm.
because like at the time I was working at like the most popular bar, and I was like, well, I want to be like the skinny girls at bar so I
Right.
could make more money. I'm like, the
I mean, that's just how it is, right? We gotta tell it how
yeah,
it
I was a
is.
bartender to shots girl, so you had to look a certain way in order to like make more tips or whatever, right? But even then it was like, but why did I feel like I had to be the smallest version of myself to be happy? Like,
Yep.
I
Hmm.
will tell you, even now, like where I'm at weight wise, I am so okay with it because I've never felt healthier.
Mm.
But even then, I look at where I am now versus where I was like postpartum with or pre-pregnancy with Laura Jane. I'm the exact same weight.
Yeah.
Like, I've lost maybe 10 pounds in the last 3 months, but even then you wouldn't notice a difference because my muscle mass jumped, but body fat percentage went down, right?
Yep.
But that's why I focus on the pictures. It's not like, cool, I have to weigh in for my coach.
Yep.
But even then I'm like, okay, cool, here's my number. But like, let me tell you that all of my leggings don't fit anymore because they're too loose. So I don't want to go
Yep.
buy more, but now I have to because I'm tired of yanking them up. But like even then, like that right there, I was like, I'd rather focus on those wins of like, oh, we're gonna have to go buy some more clothes because our clothes are too big. Okay,
Yeah.
let's go shopping. But even then, it's like, okay, if you had told me 4 years ago, oh well, you weigh 160. What?
Yeah.
There's no way. At
What
five
did I
five,
do?
like yeah, at 5'5", I weigh 160. That's heavy.
Hmm.
But then I look at my body and I'm like, nah, girl, no, that's muscle. You have
Yeah.
to remember, you want to be the strong muscle mommy that's out there. Your muscle weighs more than fat. Fat
Correct.
just takes up more room
Hmm.
in the body. But again, you're working on that body compositional changes. And I think that's something that's become really becoming more important for women now too, is how can I change the way my body looks so I can continue to have the strength, right? Versus being skinny. So we're seeing more women with six packs. We're seeing more women with muscle definitions. Are they stepping on stage? No, not all the time.
Hmm.
But again, they're proving to themselves that they are so much stronger than they once were. And that it truly is like, it's about what you eat. It's about your recovery. It's about your support system and the stress levels that you have in your daily life.
Right. And like I can attest to that too. I remember when I was like in college and I was really struggling with my eating disorder. I remember one day like weighing in and I was like, I'm 112 pounds and I'm 5'6.5". That was really low. Right. But at the same time, I was like, dang, I don't really like that number. I want to be like smaller, smaller, smaller. And then I can recall like a couple months ago stepping on the scale and I'm like 122. And I'm like, that's still not like I'm looking to get more. But at the same time, I'm like, I couldn't even imagine like if you told like college Caitlin, like, hey, you're going to be 122 pounds and you're going to feel the best that you've ever felt and be the most confident that you've ever felt. I would be like, no, you're no, wrong. And
Yeah.
the more that I focused on recovery, fueling my body with enough calories and actually pushing the weight in the gym, that's when I actually started to become like leaner and look the way that I wanted to look because I was feeling good and performing the way that I wanted to perform versus like I kind of feel like shit all the time, but what's the
Yeah.
point, right? Because people need to focus more on like that biofeedback, the energy, the digestion, the sleep, how their clothes are fitting, how the pictures look. Some of my clients, like I tell them, we're not going to step on the scale for the first 60 to 90 days of the journey because I want you to focus on the process, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And if I was working with them in person, like I would just look at the scale myself and just like close your eyes while I take your weight. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Or I even say, well, we're going to do it quarterly,
Yeah.
every quarter again, because depending on the season that you're in your journey, right?
Correct.
Sometimes it is like you need to do weekly weigh-ins
Oh yeah,
to make sure
absolutely.
that you're following the protocol, your body is responding the right way, right? But if it is like you have a lot to lose,
Mm-hmm.
you want to do this journey the right way, so long term it's sustainable. This is the process that we have to do. This is the steps that we have to take, but also we have to break the mental blockage that's happening too.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that not very many people ever want to talk about because it's like, well, I don't have issues. I
Yeah.
don't have problems. There's
Which
nothing
usually
that
means you do.
there's nothing that's holding me back right now, right? Or like, ah, I'm stressed about the food that I have to eat. I don't want to meal prep. I don't want to do this and da 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 da. All these excuses come up. They're like, hey, hold on a second, pause. Why did you start this journey in the first place?
Yeah.
Why did you want to work out? Why did you want to lose weight? Oh, because my doctor said. Okay, but why did your doctor say that you need to lose weight? Because your markers are off the charts. Yeah. Okay. It's going to take time. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to get done in 90 days. It's
Yep.
going to take longer. And we have to be okay with that. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain points that we can, dial things in for a short amount of time, but it's like, I'm not going to keep you in a deficit for 12 months.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
not okay.
And
That's
that's a
not
mistake that a
sustainable.
lot of people make too, is that they just like live in a deficit.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, do you know where your maintenance calories are? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, what we're going to do is that slow progression to figure out what you should be eating on a day-to-day basis normally if you weren't dieting.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, but I don't want to. Like, but hold on, let me show you why. So I have a client who I've just worked her up to her maintenance calories, and she's down 7 pounds in the month that we've been working together. And she's
And
like,
that's usually what happens for a lot of people because their bodies are under so much stress that when you like take
uh-huh.
that stress away by giving more food, it's like, oh, okay, I can just like let go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's like, it's your body has been, I don't want to say malnourished, but it's been
Yeah.
malnourished for a long time if you're constantly in a deficit.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to break this mental norm that it's okay to have more food, because
Yeah.
the food sources that we're eating is actually going to help you long term. It's
Yeah.
going to help your recovery. It's going to help your sleep. It's going to help with the muscle gain. It's going to help get the physique that you want. But we have to get to here first before we can slowly start chipping away and getting back into what a healthy deficit looks like.
Yeah. And I
Right.
think that I know that I coach in a way where it's like quantity is going to be very like the most important thing, but we always have to have an emphasis on quality, like an extreme emphasis on quality. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you kind of coach the same way where it's like, of course, we need to know like how much you're intaking, because if we don't, then we have no idea like what's going to get you to your goals or not. But
Yeah.
if the quality of the food that we're eating is crap, then our body isn't going to be given the nutrients that it needs to be able to actually do what it's supposed to do.
Absolutely. And then again, it's everybody has certain restrictions. Some people have autoimmune diseases. Some people have, dietary restrictions. So, okay, well, how do we work around this? So again, you don't feel like an outsider that you have to do things differently,
Mm-hmm.
but you can feel like you've got control
Mm-hmm.
of your health. You can go into a kitchen and know exactly what to cook,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is quality. It is quality food. And again, being a normal person
Yeah.
in this world, of this fitness world. Um, and again, I think it's just with if you look on social media now, I really try not to follow the influencers at all, because some
Yeah.
of them are younger than me, and I'm like, okay,
I'm like, come
listen.
on, little child, stop talking about that
Okay,
bullshit.
listen here. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
Especially like being a mom, right? A mom of
Yes.
two. And while yes, I work from home, my schedule is just as busy as if I was working my normal nine to
Yeah.
five
You
job.
have two kids.
I've got two kids, one that's southern and sassy and all the things, and my 6-year-old who's finally like he's able to do things independently. But even then, it's like I go to the gym 5 days a week. I
Mm-hmm.
focus on my protein intake. I focus on my sleep. But even then, every day is something different.
Yeah.
It's okay. Well, how am I going to pivot? How do I make this work? And honestly, it's been ever since I started over communicating with my partner, my husband, this that's when everything started to fall into place, and it didn't feel like a chore. It didn't feel like, oh my God, I have to go do these things. I'm like, well, no, but I want to do these things because I want to be here a
Yeah.
long time with my kid. I want to be able to play with them. I want to be able to pick them up. I want to teach them the importance of food. Like even my son today, Mom, I want carrots on my plate because they're good for my eyes. I'm
Love
like,
that.
I'm like, who's raising you over here? But again, women, if you've got kids, the things that you're doing now and the habits that you're creating now are going to bleed into how your kids grow up too. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that the society today is really trying to break, because we grew up in the Weight Watchers 90s, be a stick figure
Yeah.
essentially. But now we're embracing the thick thighs save lives, and
Yeah.
she's thick with two C's, and we're strong women over here, and women empowerment, which is absolutely great, and we need more of it. I just wish more women didn't feel the need to be so small, and
Yeah.
it didn't need to feel less
Mm-hmm.
at all, and that they have the power to make the change, but it's up to them to say, if I want this bad enough, I have to work for it day in and day out and never give up.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're never going to fail unless you give up. And I think,
Yeah,
again, people fear failure and they think, oh, well, I don't want to mess up this up. And that's okay. Like along the journey, you're going to mess it up sometimes. And that's just how
we're
it is. But
human, because we're
yeah,
human.
exactly. But as long as you just like say, okay, cool, this happened. I'm going to just get back up, keep moving, adapt, pivot, do what I need to do in order to make the next day a great day, you know?
Absolutely. So it's just, yeah, the fitness industry, as great as it is, can also be
Mhm.
harmful.
Of
But
course.
if you find the right people, you
Hmm.
find the right community, you find the right coach that supports you and teaches you and guides you for you specifically, because again, you as an individual are so different. Like you're different than me. Our bodies are so different, but how do we combat and how do we make this work? Right?
Absolutely.
You have to find those people, because that truly, I think, is what makes the journey so beautiful and so successful.
Hmm. Yeah.
And that's what I've learned over the last 10 years is like, cool. we go through all these seasons, us coaches, we go through all the seasons, we have trial and error, we learn a lot of things. But I see my son over here in the corner. We learn a lot of things, but it's up to us to say, well, what is it that I actually want to do?
Right.
Right.
It's up to us.
So
I think
yeah.
that's a great place to end it. I think that this has been such an incredible conversation. I'm so happy to have you back on the podcast.
Thank
And
you.
for those of you who don't follow Liz, go ahead into the show notes, follow Liz because she has a lot of great information that she's putting out. And I mean, outside of that, Liz, I'm proud of you for the journey that you've been on because like it's been incredible to see, especially like postpartum, how you've really like kicked ass, let's just say.
We're trying. It's been hard, but honestly, I've never had so much fun in a journey before.
Yeah.
And if you guys do follow my page, like I do try to keep it as raw and real as possible. Um, but this journey can be ugly. It can also be the most beautiful thing in the world. But at the end of the day, you have to step into your own power and
Mhm.
you have to own it because you are you and there's nobody else against you but yourself.
Hell yeah.
So
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, thank
thank
you,
you for
Liz.
having me.
Yeah, thank you for being on the podcast. And outside of that, everybody go out and do one thing that's going to take you one step closer to where you want to be.